All right, let's talk about a tool that I'm willing to bet is hiding in a PowerPoint deck on your work computer right this second. The SWOT analysis. It's got to be one of the most famous frameworks in all of business strategy. I mean, seriously, if you had to pick just one, SWOT would probably be it, right? It's the absolute go-to for brainstorming sessions and big planning meetings everywhere. And you can see why. It's beautifully simple. You've got this clean 4-quadrant grid that helps you map out your internal strengths and weaknesses against your external opportunities and threats. It's been a staple for decades because it just feels right, so straightforward. But here's the thing. What if this tool we all know and trust has a huge fundamental flaw? And what if that flaw isn't just making it a waste of time, but is actually making it dangerous for your strategy? Okay, so let's get right into this because the way most of us use SWOT isn't just a little bit off, it's actively working against us. It's practically designed to tap into the biggest blind spots we have in our own minds. So what is the core problem? Well, as Forbes puts it, your standard SWOT analysis completely ignores these dangerous errors in judgment. It's all based on our gut feelings and intuition, but here's the catch. Our intuition can be totally hijacked by things called cognitive biases. Think of them as predictable glitches in our thinking that can send our whole strategy off a cliff before we even get started. Let's break down a few of the big ones. First, you've got overconfidence bias. That's where we pat ourselves on the back for our amazing strengths and conveniently just ignore our glaring weaknesses. Then there's optimism bias, where we see every tiny market shift as a golden opportunity, while totally downplaying the giant flashing red lights warning us about real threats. And the absolute classic when you do a SWOT in a group. Groupthink. That's where everyone just kind of nods along with whatever the boss says, even if the idea is, terrible. So this really lays out the two roads you can go down. On one side, you've got the typical flawed SWOT. It's basically a feel-good session based on opinions that just tells you what you already want to believe. But on the other side, that's where we want to be. The smart SWOT. It's tough. It's based on cold, hard data, and it forces you to look at the uncomfortable stuff. And, most importantly, it actually gives you a real plan of attack. So, the big question is, how do we get there? How do we build that smarter SWOT? Well, we can actually redesign the whole process to outsmart our own brains and build a much, much stronger foundation for our strategy. Here are 3 steps. They seem simple, but they are absolute game changers. First, flip the whole thing on its head. Start with the external stuff, opportunities and threats. Why? Because it stops you from looking at the world through rose-colored glasses based on how great you think you are. Second, you have to demand proof. Instead of saying, oh, we have a strong brand, you have to back it up with data. Show me the customer retention numbers. Show me the market share. And third, and this is non-negotiable, every single point you write down must lead to a specific action. If you can't turn it into a to-do item, it doesn't belong on the list. Period. And that's the whole mindset shift right there. We're not just filling out a worksheet to check a box before a meeting. We are literally building a launch pad for real, tangible moves that are actually going to make a difference. Okay, and this brings us to the most powerful part of the whole thing. How to turn that grid of boring lists into an actual living strategy. This is really where the magic happens. The tool we use for this is called a Cross-SWOT analysis. You might also hear it called a TOWS analysis. Yeah, I know, it's just SWOT spelled backwards. It's a simple framework that forces you to connect the dots, to match up your internal reality with what's happening in the outside world to generate some brilliant strategic options. This is where your analysis becomes your playbook. Instead of just looking at 4 separate lists, you're now pairing them up to ask some really sharp questions. Like, how can we use our strengths to go after those opportunities? That's your aggressive growth play. Or how can we use those same strengths to defend ourselves from those threats? That's a defensive play. See? This forces you to think on a much deeper, more strategic level. All right, let's make this super concrete with a quick example. Imagine a small local nonprofit. Their biggest strength? A super passionate army of volunteers. Their biggest weakness? They get all their money from one single grant, which is pretty risky. On the opportunity side, people are suddenly getting really interested in their cause, but the threat looming over everything is a potential recession that could dry up donations. And boom, look at the result. Now you have a clear, powerful action plan. For their strength opportunity strategy, they use those amazing volunteers to launch a new campaign to capitalize on that growing public interest. To counter the threat with their strength, they use that volunteer network to run cheap fundraising events as a hedge against the recession. to fix their weakness with an opportunity, they get a team to find new grants. And finally, for the weakness-threat combo, they create a what-if plan to cut costs if that big donor pulls out. Now that is a real strategy, not just a bunch of bullet points. So the real shift here is that we have to stop thinking of a SWOT analysis as a map that just shows you a static picture of where you are. We need to start seeing it as a compass, a tool that helps you navigate and decide where you need to go next. It is not some dusty document you make once a year and then immediately file away and forget about. I mean, let's be real. In a world that changes this fast, that kind of thinking is totally useless. Instead, when you do it right, a data-driven SWOT is a living, breathing tool. It's like a mirror for your organization, one that forces you to be brutally honest with yourself, see what's really there, and constantly adjust your course. And that's really what it all comes down to. A properly done SWOT analysis holds up a mirror. It's going to show you your true strengths, your most uncomfortable weaknesses, and the real world you're playing in. The only question left is, are you and your team really ready for an honest look?